Okay, if you just bear with me, something's going a bit wrong with my computer here. There you are. Okay. Okay, so I'll just kind of give an outline of what this research is about. So this is some work that I'm doing with a colleague from so I'm from the School of Management. My research area is behavioural finance, behavioural economics. I work with a colleague from psychology who does all the kind of psychology testing around the theories and the models that I'm working on. And this is a paper about impact or social or impact investing, ethical mind. We've given it this grand title of social investing, ethical mindsets and nudges, a neuro-economic investigation. This is something I've been working on for quite a while. Just as a bit of an introduction, of course, in standard economics, we're assuming that people are fully rational, people are unemotional, people are self-interested, no psychology going on, maximizing this expected utility model, the Homo economicus view. In the real world, and this will be relevant to the social investing we're thinking about in a moment, in the real world, behavioral economics, we recognize bounded rationality, we recognize emotionality. Okay, so that's something that's going to be very key to what we're thinking about here. And the fact that people aren't fully self-interested, people think about other people think beyond the money when they're making an economic decision. So the literature very much is looking at this kind of idea of financial versus social investing, which more recently has also been called impact investing. So financial investing, where you're focusing on the bottom line, that's all you're interested in. You're not interested in what the investment is going to do for society. Social investing is where you're thinking beyond the bottom line, maybe even taking a hit on your financial return, but doing good for society. The work that we've done here has been motivated in some ways by a paper by somebody called Pilage in the Journal of Business Ethics in 2017. I'll talk a bit more about that in a moment. And it's very much a neuroeconomics paper. Okay, so we know that, so the research is showing that, investing into the financial markets has become much more complex. People are thinking beyond the bottom line. People aren't focusing so much on the finance. People are thinking about the social aspects of their investing, the impact aspects of their investing. So these investors are often considering a wide range of social factors. So in the Pilage paper, if you're interested in this area, I highly recommend you look at the Pilage paper in the Journal of Business Ethics. I would say he's the first really to provide this conceptual framework of trying to understand how we can look at financial versus social investing using a behavioral economics framework. So it's a very conceptual, discursive kind of paper. In his view, what is stopping investment into social investment, impact investment, which he argues is great for society? We need this sort of investment for society, investing into our communities, investing into the environment, that sort of thing. He's saying what's stopping this, in his view, from a behavioral economics viewpoint, is this bounded rationality, which creates this barrier in our minds. He kind of argues that our mindset is, we all want to do, he has this argument, we all want to do well for society. We have this inherent desire to invest in a social way, but somehow there's this kind of wall in our brain that stops us getting over that barrier and making this investment in reality. He calls it an intention practice gap. So he, in his view, is very simple. We just nudge people to jump over that wall and make these investments. He says, well, if this is the case, that we've got this intention practice gap, we want to do really good things, but when it comes to investing, we can't bring ourselves to do it, then when we go to our IFAs, for example, our independent financial advisors, and we we go to them to be risk profiled and asked about our investments. He said, why not just simply add a question into the questionnaire from the IFA? Would you be prepared to invest in a social investment? And Pilage says that might be sufficient just to nudge us to make these investments. We were motivated by this, although we were actually developing our work before we even saw Pilage's paper, but he kind of helped us develop it a bit more, his paper did. We were motivated to say, are we all really intrinsically driven to make these social investments? And it's just this bounded rationality, this intention practice gap. Or is it the case that we're on this kind of continuum where some people are very financially minded, some people are very socially minded? So we take a behavioral economics approach, but we go to a different area of behavioral economics from Pilage. We go to the social preference theory, where we're talking about, social preference theory says people aren't fully self-interested in comparison to the standard economics model. We do have feelings of altruism, we have feelings of warm glow when we do great things for society or whatever, invest into, put our money into charity, that sort of stuff. Feelings of fairness and empathy for our communities, for our world. Benabou and Tirole have this really interesting distinction, which I'm using in current work, where they say, what is it that motivates companies to do CSR or to do great social things? What is it that motivates individuals to do great things? And they talk about two aspects within the social preference approach: extrinsic motivation, which is where you're motivated because it's good for your bottom line. Investors drive you to do it, the markets drive you to do it, regulation drives you to do it. Basically, it's still a monetary kind of reason for doing social investing. Whereas the more hopeful thing is this intrinsic motivation, which is your mindset. Your mindset is actually saying, I really want to do great things for society. I really want to invest. It's an unconscious level motivation, which is not dependent on market forces. It's within you. You want to do it. So in our paper, we have two research questions. Can investors be placed upon a continuum from purely financially minded through a kind of a mix where, all our minds are complex and there's a mix of financial and social motives unconsciously in our mind, through to being a bit more socially driven, pure socially minded? And then our research question 2, as Pilage is asking us to test for these things, he just conceptualizes investors can be nudged. Can we nudge people towards the more socially minded investments, if that's what we want, if that's what society wants us to do? We have a theoretical model in the paper, which I won't go into all the maths of it. It's a game theory type paper, but we have investors who've got these varying complex mixes of financial and social motives. So that line there, we're going to look at in our neuro-economic testing in a moment, but that line is a theoretical line there, where you might have people at the extreme left-hand side who are purely driven by the money, investors purely driven by the money, the extreme right-hand side, investors purely driven by social considerations, and then any mix between. And in our model, we've got the possibility of investing in 2 possible investments. You're an investor, and there's 2 possible things to invest in. One company which produces cornflakes, for example. There's nothing social about it. There's no impact for communities, and you expect a high return. And then maybe another investment with lower financial return, but it's going to have great impact for society, some environmental impact or whatever it might be, some social impact. And in the model, investors to the right of this vertical line go to the social investment with lower financial return, but do great things for society. Investors to the left go to the financial investment, which is not going to do anything good for society. And then the nudges, if we can nudge people over this vertical line from left to right, we could be nudging some of these financial investors to make the social investment. That's the theory. What we do in the experiment, I'll talk through how the experiment works in a minute. What we do in the experiment is that we present our subjects. Now, these subjects are both students from our psychology department, from our school of management or economics department, but also we had some real world investors I'll talk about in a moment, as well, social investors that came along and took part in the experiment too. The basic idea was that they were shown, I'll show you the graphs in a moment, but they were shown a fictitious kind of stock price movement of a company, but also on that graph, there was a social impact line. So we were saying this company is being measured on its social impact too, and that's a social impact score. What we wanted to do was to look at where were these people looking, where were they focusing their attention, because they had to trade, they had to decide whether to buy shares, sell shares, whatever, move in and out of cash and shares. What we wanted to do was try and assess where people were looking, where were they focusing. And the ideal thing that my psychology colleague told me we could do here was use eye tracking techniques, where they wear these eye tracking glasses and we can see where they're looking. It's purely unconscious. You just don't know where you're looking. I'll talk about that in a moment. The second experiment, we then looked at whether we could nudge people along the line towards more social investing. This was the experiment. So basically what happened was they sat at a computer screen. They were shown 4 different possible scenarios. What I've shown you here with each of these pictures is the complete thing, but they only saw it unfolding bit by bit. So they would see the first part of that screen, decide whether to invest into the company or keep their money in cash. Then they would unfold, they would press a button, they would move on to the next bit, and then they would keep rebalancing. Are we moving into shares or not? The blue line, well, the black line is the share price movement of this fictitious kind of company. So the black line is share price movement, which they see gradually unfolding. So you imagine in that first diagram, you don't realize to start with it's going to hit that peak and come back down again, because you only see the first part as you're making your decision. The blue line is this social impact measurement. We said this company's been assessed on its social impact. And the thinking here is that just like a company might be very volatile in its share price, it can be volatile in its social performance, and that could change year on year, depending on the management, depending on policy, etc. Now, what we were really interested in is where were they looking? So the eye tracking would show us that their unconscious kind of flitting between looking at the blue line, looking at the black line, looking at the social impact line, looking at the financial line. And for example, you can imagine in that first diagram, you reach the point where, that second point where they're crossing over, and you're seeing that the share price is going down, but the social impact is going up. You can imagine some kind of conflict. So behavioral economists might talk about cognitive dissonance, some kind of conflict. You're not sure, well, do I carry on investing in this? Am I really driven by the money? Oh, but look, it's doing really great things for society. So, you know, we can look at the eye tracking. Because I tried this, you're totally unconscious on where you're looking. You just cannot understand what you're looking at. So it's unconscious. You're making your decision, you're buying and selling decision, hitting buttons on your keyboard. My colleague then showed us, there's a video which I don't have here, but a video, the computer records where you're looking. And what it shows you on the screen is as you're moving along, looking at the movement of these lines, dots appear, which is where your eye is looking. It's looking at the blue line. Oh, now it's moving to the black line. Oh, now it's flitting to the blue. And your eye is constant. If anyone knows anything about eye tracking, your eye is constantly moving and you're just totally unaware of it. And then when you focus on a particular line, the dot gets bigger. It's microseconds. So a long time of focusing might be 0.5 of a second.
2 minutes, please, Richard.
Okay. So what we did from this eye tracking was we were able to place people on this line here, which we call SOCFIN, which is the social and financial score. You'll see that these dots, so there's more dots than this is just representative, from purely socially minded. So this line, we've actually been able to populate. This was how really the ratio of how long they were looking at the social line versus the impact finance line. And you'll see most of it is, well, it's all to the right of 0.5. So people are towards that right-hand side, being more financially minded. But there are some that are kind of almost equally socially and financially minded. What we then did was we showed them, in the second experiment, we showed them images to try and nudge them. Financial images, i.e. little flashing images coming up of a motorboat, or a yacht or whatever. And we found when people got those images, they were nudged towards a more financial investment. Neutral images, in psychology, my colleague told me to show them a spanner or something because people aren't very excited about spanners. So that's just neutral, that does nothing. The social images are interesting because we showed them positive social images, which were things like happy school children in a deprived area going off to a new school that's being built from your investment, all smiling with their school bags. Negative images, very upset, a bit like charity things like, Live Aid or whatever, very upset children who haven't got a school. What we found was that negative images were much more powerful in pushing people into the social investment. And there's been a lot of research talking about when we want to get people to give to charity, etc., like these Live Aid events for children in need, do people respond better to positive images or negative? And sadly enough, in our psychology, we respond more strongly to negative images. So just to conclude, our neuro experiment was showing that indeed we think we can place people on this line from purely financially minded to purely socially minded to any mix in between. And I think most people have a mix. You wouldn't say you're purely driven by money, you're purely driven by social impact, but it might be a mix. We're focused, we're in the literature of this financial versus social investing, behavioral economics of that. Investors can be placed on this continuum, we believe, we think from our experiments they can. And it's a little smiley face there because we think indeed investors can be nudged to be more socially minded. Now that opens up another can of worms because there's a lot of discussion in the ethical literature. Is it ethical to nudge people away from decisions they're making to a different decision? And there's a lot of debate around that as well. But anyway, that's the key takeaways, we think, from our paper, that investors can be placed on this continuum of financially, socially minded, and investors can be nudged, which could be useful for policymakers such as maybe the Nudge Unit, the behavioural insights team that we have here in the UK, for example. They're very keen on nudging people into better decisions. That's me done.